Alright, so welcome back to this small series on mobile DevOps using Microsoft App Center. In the previous video, which was the first in the series, this is the second one, and we're only going to have a third one. But in the previous video, we were able to push a local new Xamarin project, but I mentioned how this is going to be the same for Android or iOS or even React Native. Over here to GitHub, and on GitHub we created this pull request to merge some new functionality that we coded into the main branch, and because of how we configured things, this pull request was able to generate automatically a couple of builds. The first build was actually generated as soon as the pull request was created, and these couple of checks were added here on GitHub as well. So over on the App Center, we have these couple of applications connected to that GitHub repository. So if we navigate to either of these iOS or Android applications, and over to the build, and over to the only branch that we currently have, as soon as we created the pull request, this pull request build was triggered, which was the one that was updating the checks over here in the pull request. Now, as soon as we merged the pull request into, in this case, the master branch, this automatic build was triggered. However, that is everything that we accomplished in the previous lecture so far. The APK and IPA files that would be generated once this build is complete weren't distributed. So in this video and in the next one, we're going to be focusing on continuous delivery. In this one, we're going to be focusing on Android, so sorry to you iOS developers. You're going to have to wait an extra week for me to show you how to configure iOS distribution for Android though. All of you Android developers, Xamarin developers, React Native developers, this video interests you. Because the APK, and right now I am in the iOS application, but if I navigate over on the Android application, we have the exact same thing. We have this automatic build that would have generated an APK file, which means that we are now able to start distributing that APK file, which is exactly what we're going to take a look at in this video. Now, I just want to stress that this video is just a quick demonstration of how you do this, and you can definitely get this working. However, the full description and a bit more details and for a description on how to finally distribute to the stores, which is not covered in this video, I recommend that you check my full course. It is over in the description. But over here in App Center, focusing on the Android application, the first thing that you will have to do is navigate over to the Distribute tab and set a new group. So what we're going to be able to do through App Center is distribute our application to, for example, a group of testers, for example, our beta testers, or the group of quality assurance, the quality assurance team, for example. And we can do that directly through App Center without having to go through the app stores, of course, which is exactly how we're going to be distributing in this video. So in here in the distribution groups, I am going to be adding precisely my beta testers group. And in here, I would be able to add those testers. Now, I am going to be adding a tester in here that is going to be myself, so I can show you the tester side, how is it that they will be able to access this application eventually. But of course, you can add as many emails as you want. So I am going to be adding my 10 days of xamarin.blog email in here. And I am going to be creating the group just like this. Now, by now, this tester would have received an email with an invitation to access this particular application. However, currently we have no releases, so my tester doesn't have access to any release just yet. So to distribute a new release and enable continuous delivery, we navigate back to the build and we configure this build. Now keep in mind that currently we only have one branch, but in an ideal scenario and one that I go through in the full course that I have linked in the description, we have a particular branch, a test branch that distributes to the testers, and then the master branch is just for distributing to the app stores. But since we only have one branch, we're going to be using this same one. Now, the first thing that I want to do in here is change the configuration because I no longer am debugging the application, I am already releasing it. So I am going to change the configuration over to release. And like this, if I go down in this configuration, we're going to find the option to distribute the builds directly from this same configuration in the same blade where we configure continuous integration. By selecting this option in here, we have the option to enable continuous delivery by enabling this option. However, of course, as it reads right here, only signed builds can be distributed and run on devices. So this is something that Google and all of your Android devices are going to require. The builds have to be signed for they to be able to run on a device. So that option to sign is right here. All we have to do is enable it and provide a keystore file. As soon as we provide the keystore file, the build that is generated, just as we saw in the previous video, is finally going to generate a signed APK, and that APK can be installed on devices. So before generating the keystore file, let me show you that indeed, just by enabling signed builds, we can now distribute those builds. And notice that in here we're going to have groups and store. Again, store is not something that we're going to be doing in this video, but the process is going to be pretty much identical. You just select where you want to distribute. Of course, for the store, you're going to have to do some other stuff over on the Play Store and configure the icons and configure the screenshots and so on. But eventually you just connect it over here to App Center and select it, similar to how right now we can select these beta testers groups. And that's it. And what is interesting about this is that as soon as there is a new release available that can be done automatically with continuous delivery, our users are going to be notified about it. We can choose not to notify them, but they are going to receive by default an email letting them know that a new version of the application has just been made available. That is just amazing. So now we have this continuous delivery enabled, but we do need this keystore file. So let's go ahead and create it. So to create the keystore file, I will actually have to navigate over to the terminal. So I have here my terminal, and of course on Windows it would be the command line, but basically you're going to have to execute the key tool command that is now going to be available on your computer because you have the Java SDK. Of course, since you have been developing Android applications, that means that you have the SDK, the JDK installed, so you can use key tool. If you do not have Java installed, you cannot use this tool, but I am assuming that you already do because you have been developing for Android. Now, the key tool is actually going to require a few flags so we can generate this keystore file correctly. The first one is going to be just what I said that we're going to be generating, and what we are going to be generating is a key pair. So we just pass this. And the details of each and every one of the flags are not important, just make sure that you do pass all of these flags. So the V flag, keystore, which is exactly what we're going to be generating, and exactly where this keystore is going to live. Now I want my keystore to live on the desktop just so it is easy to access, but keep in mind that this keystore file will only be generated once, and as soon as you use it to sign your APK, that is the keystore file that you have to use always. So do not lose this file, because if you lose it, you won't be able to update that APK correctly. So I will just set desktop for the moment, and I am going to assign a name to my keystore. In this case, it's just DevOps example.keystore. So the name is not important, the extension is important. Make sure that it finishes on .keystore. I am also going to be setting an alias, which notice is one of the things that eventually App Center is going to require. It is going to require three things in addition to the file itself: the keystore password, the key password, which we will set in just a second, and the key alias. So the alias that you set over here in the terminal through this flag, you should never forget it, because it's going to be required every single time that you want to use this keystore again. I am just going to use DevOps example again. And then we're going to be using some algorithm to generate this particular file, set some size, which I normally set to 2048, and for how long this is going to be valid. Normally you just set it to 10,000, so this is valid for a long time. And here is the second of the things that we're going to be required in addition to the alias, the keystore password. So just set a password in here, confirm the password, and then this program is going to ask you a few questions. You really only need to answer at least one of these. You do not need to answer all of them. As long as you answer at least one of them, everything is going to work correctly. So I'm just going to be answering what is my first and last name. And the other ones, I'm just going to press enter until this one right here, the summary of the information that I've just passed. I am just going to type Y for yes, enter, and here we're going to be required the key password different to the keystore password. Now I can just return if I want it to be exactly the same as the keystore password, feel free to do that, but keep in mind that these are two different passwords. If you do set them differently, you will have to remember them both. So by now I should already have that keystore file on my desktop. So back on App Center, I can just navigate over to Desktop, select the file, click on Open, and down below just pass the information that I've just set. The keystore password, the alias, and the key password, which again may be the same as the keystore password. And that's it. We're now going to be able to save everything. Now currently no distribution has been made because the build that was already there wasn't generating releases just yet. But from now on, every single new build, which remember that is already being triggered automatically through continuous integration, is also going to trigger that release. So continuous integration is going to be triggering continuous delivery. So let's take a look at that. Just so we trigger this new build, which is going to finally include continuous delivery, I am going to make a teeny tiny change over here on GitHub. Of course, normally you would make these changes directly from the IDE. In this case, I am going to be doing it directly from GitHub, but still I am going to be following the normal process, the normal flow that your team may follow, which is to first create a feature branch. So this is going to be my feature 2 branch. I believe we have already used feature 1. And once I am on feature 2, I can just make a teeny tiny change. It doesn't even have to do anything with your application itself. Perhaps I'm just going to be adding a README file in here. It is not even really going to have any details inside. All I really need is something different in this feature branch than on the main branch, the master branch, so that I can create a pull request. Now we already know that as soon as we create the pull request, this is going to trigger a build. That is going to be updating these couple of checks that exist right here inside of the pull request. However, that build that we should be able to see right here, right now, is not yet triggering any releases. This is just a pull request build. It doesn't generate any file that will eventually be able to be installed on devices. That is something that only happens on the automatic builds. So for now, we will have to wait for this pull request to be completed, which should update successfully these couple of checks, hopefully, fingers crossed. And as soon as these checks have been successful, that means that the build was successful. That means that we can merge this pull request. So let me just wait a couple of minutes. Of course, you don't have to wait anything because through the magic of video, these checks succeed very quickly. So again, that means that also this build has succeeded over here, the pull request build. So I can merge the pull request. Now this new change instead of the pull request, after we actually merge, which by the way means that we can delete this feature 2 branch, is the one that triggers the automatic build. And it is this automatic build, the one that is also going to be triggering the distribution. So a few things are going to happen. Of course, the build is going to be executed just as it was before because of the continuous integration setup that we have. However, as soon as the build succeeds, remember that by then it should have already created an APK file that would now be signed because we have set the keystore file information here on App Center. That signed APK would be distributed to the group that we just set. And the distribution itself is going to trigger a couple of things. First, our testers, our group, our beta testers group is going to receive an email letting them know that a new release has been made available. But most importantly, our users, these beta testers, would now have access to that new build. In the case of Android, the APK file. So let me just wait a couple of minutes for this build to succeed and show you how I said that our testers would be able to install the application. So here it is, the build has just succeeded. Now let me show you what this has triggered over here on this Android device. As you can see, I have a couple of emails. The first one is the one that I mentioned before, the one that is just inviting this person to test a particular application. In this case, our DevOps example application for Android, the one that we're focusing on right now. Now, instead of this email, of course, your users will be able to click on View App. Now, at first, we didn't have any releases, so the list that we're about to see in here would have been displayed empty. But of course, since this brand new release has just been created, we see it right here, and we already see this download button. However, before I do click on this download button, let me show you back on this email client that this beta tester also received this update, that a new version of DevOps example is available. So every single time that a new version of the application is made available, your users will receive this notification on their emails. But let's navigate back to our browser, where we were already seeing this first release. Because this is Android, we know that all we have to do is click on download, the APK is going to be downloaded, and of course, depending on the OEM, we're going to go through a different process of authorizing the APK to be installed. But in this case, all I have to do is click on install, click install anyway, because it says that Play Protect is blocking this because this is not yet from the store, but I will install it anyway. The app has been installed, we click on open, and here we have the first version of our very simple application. The application does absolutely nothing, but there it is. This is how your users would be able to install an application that has just been distributed automatically through continuous delivery. Now this is very powerful because this was all triggered automatically by a pull request. Of course, first we had to configure this, the build over here in App Center, but we configured it only once. Now, every single time that new code reaches the master branch, through a pull request, hopefully, but that could also be done through a push from a local repository or through a commit or something like that, whenever new code reaches the master branch, well, we know that a build is going to be triggered. And the build is not only going to be generating the APK, but it is now also going to be signing it with the keystore that we just set. And that signed APK will now be distributed. So excellent. In the next video, for those of you interested, we're going to be doing the same thing for iOS. The process is slightly different because Apple is a little bit more complicated to deal with when it comes to installing applications on devices. But for those of you iOS developers, Xamarin developers, React Native developers, the next video we're going to be covering how to do this. Now remember that this is a very quick rundown of what is it that we have to do. I skipped over some details. We're not really distributing to the stores. That is a slightly different process. If you do want to learn how to do that, check out the description for this video where I have links to all of my new mobile DevOps courses. I have a course for Xamarin developers, I have a course for React Native developers, I have a course for Android developers, and I have a course for iOS developers. So no matter what platform you're using to develop your applications, I have a course on mobile DevOps for you. Check out the link in the description. See you in the next one.